Well, that's what we've lost. The idea that there is supposed to be competition between companies in the same type of business to compete for employees via workplace conditions, salary, benefits, things like that. It is, the corporate collusion. I sound very tinfoil hatty right now, but the corporate collusion that goes on is very real, and it's happening at the government level.
Oh yeah.
And The Boys is touching on some of that. And when you look at stuff like the Kevin Spacey attempted comeback, when, Jonathan Majors is still sort of toiling away, that doesn't just happen. That's because Kevin Spacey has friends who tolerate his Kevin Spaciness and think it's okay. And Jonathan Majors does not have the same friends.
And even if they don't think it's okay, they're just like, that's part of life.
I mean, the
Which
one exception I make to that is Robert Downey Jr. trying to find a way back for Mel Gibson, even though I think it's misguided that Mel Gibson still needs to learn his lesson. I get it, because Robert Downey Jr. is looking at it like, I made mistakes and I got another chance.
which
Not,
I mean, fair.
yeah, but not recognizing that Robert Downey Jr. changed.
Yeah.
He stopped being a disaster of an addict and stopped, driving around with an unregistered gun in his glove compartment. We hope, but you have to actually seem like you learned your lesson, not necessarily sorry, but like you learned your lesson. And I do believe that there is a path back for certain people, but most of what's required to do that is about how much people enjoyed working with you. Were you someone that people wanted to go to bat for, or could nobody stand you? And I do think Jonathan Majors' attitude on set is a big part of the reason that everybody just went, nope, the first chance they got, because, compare that to the Johnny Depp stuff. And we can say skin color, all that stuff. Yeah, Chris Brown. Right? Like, Chris Brown beat the shit out of Rihanna.
And he's
Everybody
still
knows
here.
He's back. Now, part of that was because she was part of that, collaborated with him, stuff like that. And
Yeah.
this is where we do need to have a conversation, and maybe this is a topic for another time, but we do need to have a conversation about, okay, man did a bad. Now what? Our system of ethics and justice can't just be punitive. We know that doesn't work. If we want a more perfect society, then we have to offer a redemption arc.
There is the contrast of, like, you know, redemption should be available, but we also need to be able to call it when someone doesn't want to put in the work.
Right.
Which, like you said, the difference between Robert Downey Jr. and Mel Gibson.
Right.
And even, earlier we talked about Has Been Hotel, and how, I hope Charlie's character arc is going to involve her realizing not everyone can be redeemed, but it is so important to give the chance to the people who want it.
I mean, the idea of someone born and raised in hell wanting redemption for people, I hope they explain that, because, metaphysics is fascinating to me. I like stuff set in hell. But I am very confused by how hell works on that show. And I mean, there are certain people for which hell works just fine. I mean, Mammon and Asmodeus, and you know, none of them, they can't be redeemed. They were always
Because they're the
lords of
deadly
hell.
sins. They're not
Right.
sinners.
Right. And but because to me, there's this question, because I've been being told I was going to hell since at least the third grade.
Mhm.
And I started coming to terms with it. Well, maybe heaven and hell are just people finding their people. And what's hell for one person is heaven for another. And so a just God would just separate everybody into the people that make them happiest.
Which makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, that's my theology, because good God, what is going to be heaven for somebody who likes, oh God, Emily in Paris, right? Is not going to be me.
I mean, even I hate Emily in Paris.
I know one person who liked Emily in Paris, unironically, and I don't like that person. So I mean, that's the thing, right? When we try to do these universal right and wrong, we end up with a lot of false positives and false demonizations and straw man attacks. And that's why I do, if you take away one thing from this extended conversation, please, on my side, have it be, before you say something's political, consider that it's philosophical.
And I really like that distinction, because everyone's philosophy, scientifically, it's called the bias.
Mhm.
But because unconscious bias might even be a good word. But sorry, let me try and collect my thoughts.
Mhm.
So the philosophy we have, whether we are even aware of it or not, because we all have our own philosophy and worldview, it will affect anything we create. And I think it is an important distinction to note when something is someone's worldview,
Yeah.
versus when they're trying to push politics. And I do think there are times nowadays when there are people who are trying to push their politics, and they're trying to push a worldview that they think is politically correct, whether it makes sense or it's a good story or not. That stuff is absolutely out there. But it is such an important distinction to remember: philosophy versus political,
Mm-hmm.
which is where maybe it's just someone you don't agree with their worldview, but this is how they see the world, as opposed to someone trying to force something down your throat. There is a difference there.
Yeah. And everybody, it's impossible to not have a philosophy.
Oh, yeah.
That when people like, get your ideology, everybody has an ideology.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody has an ideology, gender or otherwise.
And like, I think that that's something too many people are unaware of, because they just go through life. And they're, especially if the people who can't comprehend that someone sees things differently from how they do, they
Right.
don't realize that their philosophy has been created and shaped by the life they've lived without fully understanding. And even people who talk about intersectional feminism and things like this, it still feels like they don't fully understand someone else's mindset. They can't comprehend someone seeing things differently than they do.
Trust me, they don't even understand their own.
No.
No.
And unfortunately, to some of that, I think, is because they aren't actually thinking about things. It's they were told something.
Yep.
Like, oh, minorities are oppressed, and they can get some examples, or they're like, oh, well, that makes sense. Or even they're told you're not allowed to question it. And so, especially since schools aren't teaching people to think, they're just teaching people to memorize and answer multiple choice questions. So they've just been taught to accept that. And especially if when it comes to politically correct things, it's like, oh, I can't question this person because of their different experience. And so they just accept this worldview that they didn't construct on their own, even. And so it leads to hypocrisy. And I think that's part of where you get a story like Steven Universe, which is very messy when you look at the ideology, because I don't know that Rebecca Sugar has actually contemplated her own philosophy. I think she was just going with kind of not even pop feminism, but a kind of very soft liberalism. Portland liberalism. Can I just call it Portland liberalism?
Portland liberalism is accurate, because I know that my cope, because I get attacked by all sides. Reading what the vitriol and seeing the double think in it is fascinating to me. The number of so-called feminists who jump to call me a slut or a whore or something like that is like, all right, well, you can be dismissed now. Your opinion, I'm glad you hate me. You know, similarly, the people who try to have it both ways, or I am both stupid and duped and, you know, taken under the spell of some master manipulator, and I'm evil and helping the master manipulator. Well, okay, you I can dismiss as well, because you're just looking for a narrative that sounds good to match your feel that I generated in you. And as an artist, even my job, even as a you know, just a content creator that analyzes things, as an analyst, my job is not to provide confirmation bias for spoiled brats.
No.
My job is to give interesting, different perspectives that may be difficult, may be painful, because they make you think.
And I mean, that's how I got where I am now. Because, like I said, when I started listening to you, I was extremely conservative. But I started listening to you during the Last of Us stuff because what you were saying made sense.
It's fucking wild, that whole Last of Us thing. Oh my God. Yeah.
And also just because, like I said, you made sense and you weren't yelling at me, not me personally, but you weren't attacking through your videos. You were being extremely reasonable. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'll listen to what she has to say. And over time, I unlearned some of my own stuff. And I was able to come to a more nuanced position as well.
And that is why I occasionally go after a commenter pretty hard. And I'll own that. You know, I don't enjoy doing it. It's a conscious choice, because if somebody is complaining about being attacked and they're spending week after week after week lobbing attacks from the comments section, I'm not acting in accordance with my own values to let them keep doing that unchallenged. That is using them as a click, not respecting them as a human being.
There's also just like, if they're in your comments week after week, listening to your stuff, then what are they doing?
Okay, let's face it, that's sacrificing one person to save a whole bunch who are doing the same thing and didn't see the contradiction in their own behavior. And I have to be able to see someone as a human before I go hard at them, because I'm aware they are not prepared for the truth. And I don't like that. It hurts me to hurt somebody else, but it is useful to provide a concrete example of the behavior I'm talking about, so that other people can see, like, look, you see in the world what you are training your brain to prioritize.
I mean, it's a lot like, during the man versus bear debate, where not even a debate, a conversation, but we had this stuff in the comments where people were proving this is why women choose the
Oh,
bear.
that was so educational for me because it just, and that's the thing. I take so much shit on a regular basis. It is really important for me to see the things that hurt people who are not inner Billy Butcher, you know? It yeah, that, and I mean, I learned something from that whole thing.
Mhm.
And it wasn't just that some people, I some people need hugs.
Yes.
I'll leave it there. Like, oh my God, sometimes I wish I could just reach the internet and hug people because even though they're talking absolute shit, their pain is real.
Yes.
And it's very hard to this is why I distinguish between I think and I feel, and this is why I, you know, want to encourage criticizing the right way, responding the right way, even praising the right way.
Mhm.
It's amazing how many people think when the worst thing sometimes I think people can do is try to help,
In some ways, yes.
because often that help is actually condescension,
Yeah.
because help is something someone wants you to do, not something you're forcing on the other person,
Yeah.
you know? So it's, and that requires self-awareness, and it requires self-control, and all of that is very, very difficult in people in Gen X. We were neglected quite
Mhm.
badly.
Oh yeah.
But the flip side of that is we were allowed to fail. We weren't the helicopter parent generation. We fell down, we went boom, nobody gave a shit. We got back up, we figured it out. As painful as that shit was, my heart's breaking for people that haven't learned how to do that. And I do think a lot of this anguish, this culture war, is a result of, because, the steps were followed and the girlfriend didn't materialize, or the wingman boyfriend isn't real. There's this, everything sucks, nothing is good, I'm going to retreat back into my wine mom porn that I'm going to deny as wine mom porn, like
Mhm.
like you said.
Yeah.
And that that is a part of the brain that's stay in the cave where it's safe. If we don't start coming out of the cave, we are going to wither up as a species.
And like that's I know over the course of doing this podcast, I've my whole thing has shifted from like being very sympathetic towards fanboys and understanding why they feel attacked, to I still understand why they feel attacked, but I'm also just kind of tired of them not actually doing anything and just continuing to whine about it and play the victim.
You know what? I would be happy if people actually responded to what I said or what you said,
Mm-hmm.
not what they think you meant.
Mm-hmm.
And that is very hard because let's face it, we all have emotional responses to certain things.
Oh yeah.
There's been a whole support group of between Baldur's Gate 3 and the Court of Thorn and Roses. People have had to, I mean, I've got a gif of a cartoon redhead breathing into a paper bag for certain things, because like, holy shit, right? Trauma
Yeah.
trigger. And I I do think the books are worthy for that because we've made culture around them. And I think
Mhm.
back to stuff like A Clockwork Orange, Stanley Kubrick, Eyes Wide Shut, God, other controversial films, even Mad Max in its day.
Mhm.
Star Wars was always considered crap, by the way. I do think that the discussions we have through art are important, and pop culture matters because it's common metaphors.
Yes.
It, like you said, when people protest and they're using a Harry Potter reference, that's why I call J.K. Rowling Wine Mom Sauron. It's not hers. Death Eater is giving her too much credit. It's keeping her brand alive.
Yeah.
Um, but you know, these things matter. These are common myths. These are the Thors and the Lokis. And no, okay, we still have Thors and Lokis, but now it's MCU, not the Norse gods. And oh dear God, like, people complain about cultural appropriation and don't realize that was Norse religion, people.
Yeah.
Like, holy shit.
God, that no.
The Norse were not the colonizers.
No.
You're
Well,
confusing them with the Dutch.
this
The
is true.
Norse were colonized by the Danes and the Swedes.
Oh,
Like,
that's true.
oh my God, it's just so we keep appropriating Norse culture, and that's okay. But, the minute someone tries to include something that isn't considered um white into anything, then it's, well, oh my God, except, Black Panther kind of broke the seal on that.
Yeah.
And, the people who are like, why can't it be White Panther? It's like, you are the same people that tell people create new stories. Don't swap, don't swap existing ones.
Yeah.
You just proved you're not serious about that. It's just sour grapes.
And it's like they're trying to make a point, and I do understand the point they're trying to make, but it's also like, okay, you've been using the same point for 10 years now.
It's an inherently invalid point, however, because for years in Hollywood, characters were race swapped.
Mm-hmm.
Leonard Nimoy played Asians.
Yul
So
Brynner too.
yeah, they took characters that were canonically not white and put white actors in the parts. And that was seen as
Acceptable.
fine because white culture was centered. And I mean, Jim Crow laws. There was a time you couldn't do it. I mean, shit. Part of the thing that caused the whole comics code thing is, oh God, black people in comics. So to say it was never done, that's the problem. It was done for years. We're correcting there. I mean, Elizabeth Taylor played Cleopatra.
Yeah. I will say I I don't think the answer is to or not gender swap, is to race swap existing characters. Again, I am in the make new characters, make new stories, please.
Oh,
Camp.
the problem there again
It,
isn't politics. It's the fact that maintaining all these IPs is incredibly expensive, and
yeah.
the companies don't want to do new stuff when they have these pre-existing trademarks. They're not going to let them go
No.
because then somebody else might be able to make money off of it, but they don't want to pay for it to just sit there either. And that's killing. It's funny because we have Star Wars because of copyright.
Yeah.
Because George Lucas couldn't get the rights to Flash Gordon. And was it? Yeah, it was Flash Gordon.
Yeah.
Right. So he did what Dragon Age did. He made this pastiche property that turned out to be Star Wars, and boom. Right. What's Flash Gordon?
Yeah. Same with John Carter.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, John Carter, the corpse has been so picked on Edgar Rice Burroughs that they couldn't make that. I actually liked that movie. And I'm sad that it didn't work because I thought it was okay based on what they were able to do at the time.
The problem was just mostly marketing. marketing.
Well, yeah, the director wouldn't give them finished CGI footage.
Yeah.
Yeah, he overvalued how much people knew about John Carter.
Yeah.
So it just it now what we've got is that people want to make news stories, but they can't. You know, not everybody can be Vivzy Pop and toil away on web series that happen to have successful crowd funds and make hell of a boss while you're waiting for Has Been to get picked up and have a community that supports you through, paying for merchandise and crowd funds and all that stuff. Like,
Yeah. Especially with the shape of social media right now.
yeah,
Where it's, Vivzy Pop made her name in the days of Tumblr and YouTube, but even Tumblr isn't what it used to be. You definitely have a hard time getting a foot in on Twitter.
Twitter's dying anyway. I mean,
Twitter's dying.
It's Instagram and Threads now, and those are meta
and
properties.
Even Instagram deprioritizes art. So it's like, no, they don't want you to post photos. They want you to post TikTok videos.
And even TikTok. I mean, TikTok, the problem with Instagram and TikTok is that's a full-time job.
Oh, yeah.
Like there's so much work that has to go into that. You're doing that instead of your main gig.
Yeah.
It literally cannibalizes from the reason you're doing this fucking godforsaken social media.
Pretty much, yeah.
Right. And that's not good for anything. We're in an age where you have to already be wealthy and know people to get stuff made, and that's not good.
Yeah, the best time to start an art career right now is 10 years ago on DeviantArt, basically.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's why I always encourage
15 years ago.
That's why I encourage people whose kids are creative. I say, don't wait. Let them start just farting around in stuff now. Let them make videos. Let them make board games. Just make shit. Because, okay, so what? You'll have to dry some tears when people are mean to them. But the problem is support, actual support, is hard and time consuming.